Next up, I'd like to welcome Aditya, a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation, to talk about Towards CBC Casper.
Hey guys, welcome to my talk on Towards a Practical CBC Casper. Right. I'm going to be introducing some CBC concepts and then telling you why you should care about them. I'll discuss a recent proposal for CBC and the beacon chain, followed by some research updates, and then our roadmap. So, Casper Correct by Construction is not just a single consensus protocol, it's this family of consensus protocols, and they are characterized by having the same safety proof. So we start from a minimal CBC protocol that we specify further and further until we reach our requirements. And since they've been formed from this master template, we can be guaranteed that they satisfy the same safety proofs. So just a little bit of background. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, consensus protocols were synonymous with traditional BFT techniques, like PBFT there. And more recently, blockchain projects have started utilizing those in the form of Casper FFG and Tendermint. Bitcoin introduced a different class of consensus, which is Nakamoto consensus or proof of work consensus. And then there is Casper CBC and maybe Avalanche. So Casper CBC is one of the families of consensus protocols that's suitable for proof of stake cryptocurrencies. And it's very different from traditional BFT techniques because it doesn't have any in-protocol thresholds. And well, that leads to like severely different types of characteristics, which we look into. So why should you care? Why should you care about Casper CBC at all? Well, one thing that you may not have seen before is you have some degree of safety even if more than 1/3 of your nodes are faulty. So, well, you're not going to get this with any type of quorum intersection argument that BFT algorithms make. So any type of 2/3 quorum kind of a thing is not going to get you safety if more than 1/3 nodes are faulty. And the second thing is we can tolerate up to a half offline nodes or crash nodes, but that's subject to ongoing research on liveness strategies. More motivation. The protocol is simple. It's not very complex to grasp. It has very few working components, and each of these components is formally defined, and there are extensive proofs about its correctness. And finally, all of these protocols are correct by construction, which means that small tweaks in how it works, as long as you don't change the way that they are constructed, it's not going to break consensus safety. So that's a major advantage. You can play around with it, but you still have some strong guarantees. All right, so one of the major selling points of Casper CBC is this subjective fault tolerance threshold, which means that since there is no in-protocol threshold, you can basically choose your desired level of safety on, let's say, blocks for blockchains. So, you know, let's take an example here. You have 5 validators, and let's say you have 2 forks, fork 0 and fork 1. And, well, here the red color represents a low level of certainty in that fork, and green color here represents a high level of certainty. And as Vitalik presented in his talk in the morning, this level of certainty is basically the number of people that have to break rules in order to propose something contradictory. So you can see at the beginning, validators are proposing 1s and 0s, and that goes on for quite a bit. And all of this is in the red, which means that you have no level of safety on these values, of 0s and 1s. As you progress further, you can see that the network is kind of converging towards 0, and lots of people are producing 0s. And this orange and yellow color represents like an increasing level of safety. And then finally, you get to the green, which is a very high degree of certainty. Now, One important point is, this may seem like Bitcoin, where the more people mining on a fork, the stronger that fork becomes. But it's not like Bitcoin. It's really deterministic. There is no probabilistic kind of guarantees here. It's completely deterministic. And well, the intuition behind this is a certain degree of common knowledge, which increases in the network as more nodes start proposing the same things. So let's talk about a recent proposal of incorporating CBC elements in the beacon chain. So why would we want to do this? Beacon chain is already a great proposal. Why do we want to incorporate any CBC elements? Well, the beacon chain consensus has kind of two moving parts. One of them is the finality gadget, and the other is the LMD ghost, which is responsible for short-term chain growth, and the other is responsible for finalizing epochs. Usually they, play well together and kind of fight together, but under adverse conditions, given the right kind of bad conditions, things can go wrong. So if you have, for example, a small malicious stake and some bad network latency, you can actually pit them against each other. And I'm going to show you one of the cases. So I'm picking this example from an ETH research post. So let's say you have two forks, fork A and fork B, and you come across this condition. Now note that this condition in itself is hard to reach. You need some really weird network latency to make this happen. But let's say that you do end up in this situation. And you have 3 slots here. The first slot has a 70-30 split. The second one has 60-30, and this one has 60-30 as well. So you can see that in round 2 and round 3, 10% of the votes have not been made yet. So we are going to assume that these are malicious votes who will vote late and try to kind of prevent finalization from happening, and they'll try to flip-flop the fork choice. So as you can see here, the latest justified block is in fork A, leading to the fork choice winner being in fork A. Next, the 10% malicious people actually do vote, and they vote for fork B. And this leads to this being the latest justified block, and then the fork choice winner is in fork B. So we flip-flopped from fork A to fork B, and then we can actually make it happen again by voting on this block. So the 10% malicious votes go into this, and then the fork choice is fork A again. And actually, this can go on for a sustained amount of time, given that you have this really weird kind of network latency, which allows for these conditions to arise. So why Casper CBC? Is it really going to help to solve situations like this? Yes, it is, because the fork choice is actually quite simple. It's only LMD ghost. And all these issues that arise due to chain growth issues between LMD and the finality gadget will be avoided. But the biggest selling point would be that since there are very few number of rules, the attack surface is lower and the security analysis is much easier. So you can think of Casper CBC for beacon chain as this LMD only proposal. So why wasn't it done already? What prevented it from being implemented already? So well, the problem is efficiency of LMD ghost over long ranges. So currently in the beacon chain, you execute LMD ghost for a maximum height of between 2 epochs. So you don't really care about how efficient it is because it's a maximum of just the range between 2 epochs. But if you're going to do LMD ghost only, which means you're trying to execute it from genesis till the tip, it gets quite expensive very fast. So this is Vitalik's recent proposal, which is called Bitwise LMD Ghost, which proposes an efficiency improvement in executing their LMD Ghost fork choice. And well, it's really good because it's actually really close to the ETH 2.0 spec. There are very small deviations, and specifically, the fork choice rule becomes LMD Ghost only. You add some new attestation metadata to the state, and there are new slashing conditions, but it's just one slashing condition. And this makes for a really good side project for client devs. If anyone wants to pick it up, you can come and reach me or Vitalik. And You can find more information about this in the ETH 2.0 spec GitHub, issue 433 and 701. All right, some research updates and how CBC is moving towards practicality. So I've shown you this diagram before. This is the message structure that clients observe. So the clients have to detect safety for themselves. So there are no thresholds. There is no point at which you say, okay, I've seen 2/3 votes, and now I'm deeming this block as being final. That's not going to happen. You have to look at this emerging structure of messages and then figure out what level of finality you have for yourself. So let's say you're a client and you observe this message structure. You want to get to this. And basically, you have to execute some algorithm which provides you a score for each of these messages, which is what is your degree of certainty on that message? How many people need to break rules or equivocate in order to propose something contradictory? So earlier research had reduced this problem of detecting finality to the NP problem of clique. So basically, the complexity was exponential, which is not feasible for large-sized problems. But then recent research has reduced it down to quadratic in the number of validators, which makes it quite practical. And you can check it out and find out more about it on hackingresearch.ch. There are some efforts towards formal verification. So Layer X, headed by Ruya, is working towards the formal verification of the CBC draft paper in Isabel. Liveness research. So there has been some uncertainty about whether CBC is live. Well, there isn't any impossibility proof that says CBC isn't live. Instead, we have this naive liveness strategy, which proves that you can define a live CBC protocol. So just some details about it. It's based on the reliable broadcast primitive by Braca. It's a round-based protocol, and it takes O of n squared communication per round. And in the case of binary consensus, when we are deciding on a bit, it's going to lead to finality with a very high degree in 3 rounds. But the drawback is this 2/3 honest assumption that the reliable broadcast primitive makes. Also, this is not really practical because it's basically round-based and it has n squared complexity per round. So, we need to research more and go towards practical liveness strategies. And if you want to join into this, then you're very welcome and you can reach out to me. Now for the roadmap, some clarifications first. There is a Casper CBC research roadmap that is independent of project deployments. So it's not dependent on Ethereum 2.0 releasing or something. There is also an implementation roadmap, which is parallel to the ETH 2.0 roadmap. There have been some efforts towards implementation of a parity client with CBC consensus rules. And more importantly, none of these roadmaps conflict with ETH 2.0. Well, ETH 2.0, actually mainstream Ethereum research and Casper CBC research are not that different. They share more in common than you think. The most notable point would be this LMD ghost fork choice rule. All right, now for the present state of Casper CBC research. As for the specification of the minimal Casper CBC protocol, there is a safety proof for the minimal protocol. Some useful fork choice rules have been proposed, like latest honest message-driven ghost and a basic sharding fork choice rule. And there is a proposal for a light client. LMD estimators, these are probably the more useful fork choice rules in CBC. And for these, we have an algorithm to detect the degree of finality, which was the depiction I showed you earlier. And there is also a plausible liveness argument. With respect to sharding, there is a hierarchical sharding design, which many of you may have seen in visualizations. It uses cross-shard messaging, and there are strong atomicity guarantees about these cross-shard messaging systems. The future roadmap, we need to work on validator strategies, that is liveness strategies, and we need to find out more ways of expressing them formally. Proof of stake research, that's a big thing on the to-do list. Penalties and rewards for faults and optimal behavior. And well, one of the important theoretic thing to do is a game theoretic analysis that the rewards and penalty schemes that we come up with actually leads to the honest protocol being the equilibrium. So that's a big thing. And for sharding, we need to come up with a strong light client specification, load balancing for hierarchical sharding, and efficiency improvements in general. Two major things that are missing here are data availability and data validity, but I'm pretty sure we can kind of reuse the ETH 2.0 research in order to do this. All right, thank you guys, and you can reach out to me on Twitter here.